in my experience now, looking back in hindsight, I really, 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 really enjoyed the startup challenges. I think more than any other job I've done in my career.
Hey, and welcome to the Change Leaders Playbook, bringing you all things delivery leadership in a podcast. I'm Cliff, an experienced delivery leader and your host. Today, I'm joined by Ian Herbert, who's a very experienced change manager for over 25 years and is now enjoying semi-retirement and indulging in his podcasting hobby, all related to his favourite football soccer team. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with Ian in a former life, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with him. So, hello, Ian. How you doing?
Hi, Cliff. Tremendous pleasure to be on the podcast. Really looking forward to this. As you say, we've worked with each other in the past, so it'd be interesting to see how our divergent paths have sort of like influenced our thoughts. So, yeah, looking forward to this.
Fabulous. So, right, Ian, it's been a while since we've spoken. I know you're all about Blackburn Rovers. You're into podcasting as well, and yep. I have to say, you certainly have the voice for it and the charisma for it. So I'm sure I've got a lot to learn from you all about that too. But let's start with you just telling us about your journey. How did you get to the experience you have with projects, with programs, and what are the highlights of that?
There's a very an infamous, I think, social media meme, isn't there, based around the Withnell and I film, which is, we appear to have gone on holiday by accident. I became a change manager pretty much in the same way, totally by accident. Whether you consider it to be in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the right time, I'm not entirely sure, but the situation was that I was in a subsidiary of what was then Midland Bank, because it was prior to the HSBC takeover. There's a massive systems implementation which was going wrong. And because I worked there for a long time and I knew a lot of people and I'd done a lot of different jobs in the organisation, I kind of had a good holistic overview. And little did I know, but then I just started my change management career. So I became a program manager entirely by accident and took over what was an ailing project and learnt so much so quickly by the seat of my pants, and thought, well, I quite like this. I'd like to do more of this. So that's really how it started. But I think it's interesting that he saw the desirable characteristics of that role as being, a lot of people, you've got a good network, and you've done a lot of different kinds of jobs in the organisation. So your perspective is quite broad, and that's something that I've carried with me since then.
Fabulous. So yeah, I certainly can attest to your perspective being broad, your opinions being broad, and your ability to listen to people and act on it being quite adept as well. So yeah, that's very good. Now, another question: what do you do now, and what's your passion right now?
Yeah, well, my passion has kind of always been sport. There was a period when I was in the sixth form at school. An old boy of my school is a chap called Russell Harty, who, for viewers and readers, listeners of a certain age, will remember him from being on TV, on ITV, and he had some chat shows, I think on the BBC as well. And he did that thing where you come back to your old school, you give a talk to the sixth form, and he was talking about careers in broadcasting. And there's a little light bulb went on above my head. And I thought, oh, I quite fancy that. And then I never took it any further, and I got a sponsorship from Midland Bank to do a banking degree. And so, you turn left and your career follows a certain path. But I think as I got older, I wanted to indulge this creative side. And so being in the status that I would say is semi-retirement, it's given me the ability to do that. And I own a fifth. There's a group of five of us that own a company called Northern Horde Limited, which owns and operates a website called brfcs.com. And brfcs.com is kind of like a repository for a lot of fan-based articles, statistics, nostalgia. There's a forum on there, and we host a podcast called 4,000 Holes. I've got with me a copy here of the fanzine, 4,000 Holes as well. So fanzines are making a bit of a comeback. The young people of today don't know what reading something on paper looks like, and they try to pinch and zoom out on paper. It's hilarious to see. So we do all of that sort of good stuff. And it's a really, really powerful mix of people and different skills that's come together, almost by accident. So it's serendipitous in that respect. But I was listening to an interview with Frank Skinner earlier this week, and he was talking about blokes of a certain age that buy guitar shops not for financial return, but because they love guitars and they love the idea of being surrounded by guitars all day and talking to people who come into the shop about guitars. And 4,000 Holes and Blackburn Rovers is my guitar shop. That gives me the ability and gives me an excuse to talk to people at the club, to interview former players, managers, journalists, and just indulge myself in something that I really, really enjoy. So I will not retire to Barbados off the proceeds of the website. We do it entirely as a labour of love, but it's not. It doesn't really feel like a labour. It just feels like it's tapping into that creative mode. So if you are a Blackburn Rovers supporter out there, give us a listen. 4,000 Holes on Acast, Spotify, Apple, yada yada yada, all the usual outlets, and by all means, drop by brfcs.com.
Shameless plug there, absolutely shameless, and very good indeed. Now, one of the things I recall about you and things that I think are really important is creating an environment for project teams to succeed, or program teams, or anyone that's delivering something meaningful to an intended audience and a market. You have a knack of creating an environment, a culture where that can thrive, and I just want to tap into that and start the conversation about what does that mean to you in terms of what is a culture, because it's a buzzword that's been bandied around a lot. What is a culture where success thrives, and then I'll go a bit more about how to define and create that.
Yeah, I don't think I fully appreciated the importance of culture until you've experienced a bad one and a good one. And then you start doing some self-analysis about, well, when I did that role, working for that person, why was I deeply unhappy? And came home every night sort of with this grey cloud over my head. But when I did that job, working for that person, what was it that made me come home and think, God, I can't wait to get back in tomorrow. I can't wait to get stuck into the challenges. And it came a point about really as a result of working for one particularly influential individual. This chap was a guy called Brian Carney, who was the former head of audit of Midland Bank, would you believe, who was a chartered accountant, who was incredibly entrepreneurial for a guy who'd had that role. And he was the founding FD at First Direct when First Direct was set up. And my path first crossed with him when he was sent down to the unit that I worked in, with a mandate to close us down, which is interesting. So we had a management team meeting, and the first thing he said was, "Hi, I'm Brian. It's really lovely to meet all of you. I've been given 6 weeks to investigate whether this unit is worth carrying on. Have I got your attention?" Yes, you have got our attention. Right, I've met a few people. You all seem lovely people. Is there a business here that's worth saving? And he kind of like gave us the opportunity to display our passion and enthusiasm, why we thought the business. He said, right, we need to harness that then. How are we going to do this? And there was something about the way he approached the problem, the way that he built that team, and he galvanized us. And the support that he provided, and he would go into battle for us when we needed to, when we're hitting problems, that it was a joy to work for him. You felt there was nothing that you couldn't take to him as a problem, say, boss, I need some help with this. This is all, the culture of this business has to be all about putting the customer front and center, doing things for the customer better, faster, if possible cheaper, but not necessarily. If better and faster means they've got to pay more, then we're upfront about that, but we'll give good value. That was what he was all about. And he started talking about culture and wanting to develop culture. And at the time, I think I'd been on one sort of like junior management course that talked about culture. And they described it as the way we do things around here. And since then, I've seen a couple of other definitions, which I really, really like, on LinkedIn, funnily enough, which is culture is how you feel about your job on a Sunday night. And again, going back to that, do I want to go to work tomorrow? I'm enthused and energetic. And it's how people behave when they think that nobody's watching. So the real authentic person. So I've worked for some people in my career who were brilliant in public at espousing this vision. But then when it came down to actual practicalities, you didn't get that support that you needed from them. And they talked a great game, but they didn't deliver. Brian absolutely did. And I think that there was a little light bulb, well, no, there's a massive light bulb moment at that point that made me think, this guy's different. Not worked for anybody like this before. And it was really, really fascinating to see how he put culture front and centre. But that came from his First Direct ethos. because they were having to be radically different in that marketplace. They had to deliver something that the HSBC branch network couldn't do, and so they had a clean slate and was able to create that from scratch. And the power of a good culture improves performance, reliability, staff retention, motivation, enthusiasm, energy levels, all of those things. So think, this is kind of important. I need to pay attention to that. I think that's where I first sort of like latched onto it.
Great response. Quite insightful as well. What do you think he did differently in terms of how he enabled people, you and others, to actually latch onto his vision and buy into that culture?
Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead.
I'll say it starts at the top, because I think the leader, who is the focal point of that organisation, sets the tone. Leaders cast a long shadow, all of that sort of good stuff. I say he came in HSBC, and we had that initial meeting, and wow, this guy's different. I've never met anybody like this before. And then when we went to, it was Derbyshire Building Society, actually, we were setting up a specialist lending subsidiary there to try and tap into some of the niche markets that the main clearers wouldn't do in the corporate and commercial world. And it was about getting the team together, articulating the vision, being absolutely crystal clear about what we were going to do, but asking for how we were going to do it. So he didn't tell people how to do the job. He sort of said, this is the nature of the problem, and you're around this table to solve this problem. And he would provoke a very, very positive debate and discussion around the table. We would articulate lots and lots of different options and alternatives. And it felt like you'd been part of it. So I suppose it's got cabinet responsibility in that respect. You were buying in to the mandate from the top. So when you were taking that to your team and sharing that vision, there was a consistent message going across the business that we were really, really passionate about it. Brian always told a story about when First Direct first went live, about one of the agents in Leeds having a customer in massive distress on the phone. And sort of say, I've lost my credit cards, I've lost my wallet, I've lost my purse, I'm in Leeds, I don't know, what can anybody do to help me? And this agent felt sufficiently empowered to come off the phones, get into a car, drive into the centre of Leeds, draw £100 out of a personal bank account, give it to this customer at Leeds railway station, say, buy your rail ticket, go home, and then we'll sort all the paperwork out afterwards. Just get yourself home. And when she went back and explained to her boss what she'd done, that's absolutely fantastic. And she was nominated for sort of like all these employee award recognition schemes. And there are people who said, well, that's outrageous. How could she just do that? How could she leave the phones? How could she? But she felt sufficiently empowered to put that customer front and centre, and was applauded. And her colleagues were happy to cover the calls while she went and did that. And an hour later, she was back. And the customer was just so overwhelmed. The number of letters that she wrote to like the CEO, sort of saying, this is amazing. So he will quote stories like that by legion, sort of saying, this is what good service looks like. This is what I want you all to feel, that you are empowered to make really good decisions that put the customer front and centre. He was also very strong in the early days of the management team in taking us off site and getting us to learn about each other. Because one of his major concerns when he first came to HSBC was that we were all too nice to each other and we wouldn't have the difficult conversations. So he sort of said, the culture I'm after isn't about being polite and courteous and never challenging somebody. It's about respect, but you've got to be able to challenge. So, salesperson, if you feel you're being let down by operations, you've got to be more demanding of the operations team. Operations, if you're being let down by IT, you've got to be more demanding of the IT team. And you've got to come together and galvanise and work out how you're going to resolve the supply chain, almost as it were. And he did that so powerfully, but so authentically. And if you were really, really struggling, somebody's boss was blocking, he would go and have those conversations and free things up. So he thought, this is great. This is great. We've actually got somebody who's articulated a vision, communicated it really authentically and powerfully, mobilized us, energized us, and it becomes viral thereafter. I think it's really, really easy then to get your teams on side and deliver what the customer really, really needs.
Yeah, great job leadership from what I can see and hear there. So I think that speaks to setting a clear vision, having a good view of what that looks like for yourself as a leader, and not being afraid to be demanding of people, but also giving them the empowerment to make the call themselves and use their own skills
Exactly.
and abilities to find out how to go about doing the thing. And there's, of course, customer centricity at the heart of all of that.
He was absolutely evangelical about that. As far as he was concerned, that was how we were going to differentiate ourselves. So it's kind of like, if you get this wrong, guys, all bets are off. So, let's have that as a mantra front and center. So everything that we did was predicated on that. It was incredibly powerful.
Great stuff. So what about, you've worked in startups and you've worked in very large organizations that have a lot of history and potentially a lot of complexities. So are there differences in setting up a winning culture in those types of businesses? And more to the point, are there benefits on either side where if you converge the two, you've got an even better formula?
Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons of each. I flip-flopped during my career. I did a contractor role for about 10 to 12 years, and I flip-flopped between large and small organizations. And what I found was that was, again, an incredibly energizing an appealing role, because you were able to take lessons from one to the next and sort of like synthesize all the ideas that you'd seen together to make something powerful, and you were able to get to a solution much, much quicker. Large organizations these days, I found as I got older and moved through my career, it became more about lowest common denominator management. So it became about, here is a procedures manual, here is a process, and thou shalt follow the process, with very little room for initiative, because it was about getting, dare I say it, relatively inexperienced people, therefore relatively cheap people, able to do work, but putting constraints around them to stop them doing something really, really bad. So yeah, we'll create a process and we'll put some checkpoints in. You have to go to this committee for sign off, and you have to go to that person for approval, and you can't go beyond that without those. So that's very rigid, very dogmatic. And in a large organization that's trying to do lots and lots of things across lots and lots of territories, I can see the advantages of that. But as always, there are exceptions that you need to be able to accommodate. So the problem with that kind of approach is it's not remotely entrepreneurial. So if you're trying to introduce something that's really brand spanking new, a new product, or putting a new service out there to customers in a particular sector, it doesn't lend itself to fast-moving decisions and getting to market quickly. The flip side of that was, particularly when I was at Salt at Derbyshire, say this specialist lender, was we had a completely free reign. So we were told, right, we need to be at this size with this size of balance sheet, generating this income at this margin, this fee income by this point in time. And so it was about go and investigate what the art of the possible is. So it was fantastic to be able to do that research and feel that all things were possible. When you set out on day one, there was nothing that was off the table. And then gradually, you whittled it down into something that was a meaningful proposition that you could then all agree to work on. And what I found about that was, because of the flexibility, there was no change management manual. It was, you've been a change manager for like 10 years. You know what you're doing. You've got to make it happen. This is how much money we've got to spend, so don't spend more than that. We can't employ more than this number of people, so don't do that. Think creatively. Go away and find out how we can do things. And so one of the solutions that we brought into Salt was we didn't buy a loan administration system. We effectively leased one that was turnover related. So I negotiated with the supplier. So look, we can't afford to buy this thing outright. We don't really want 200 seat licenses. We're probably only going to have 10 or 15 people using this for 12 months. And they sort of said, well, I'll tell you what, we've got faith in you and your ability to grow. Let's do a turnover related deal. And so that was ideal for us. We knew exactly how much of our margin would be given out to running that system. Now, a decision like that in a large global bank, I dread to think how many committees you would have to go to and how many people you would have to try and persuade of the efficacy of your argument. How we arrived at that conclusion, there was 6 people around a table in a meeting room going, right, what could we do? We could do this. Right, pros and cons. 10 minutes, here's some Post-its. Put some pros and cons on. Let's have a discussion. So the speed of it And then the collective buy-in that you got was really, really energizing. The downside of a small company is you then can't walk out of that meeting room and delegate all the work to all the different departments. It's frustrating from the perspective that you don't have the resource pools that you do in large companies, but it's tremendously energizing when you can get the decision makers. They're there. You're shouting across the office. Guys, go, come on, we're just 5 minutes. Yeah, we just need to sort this out. And the number of stand-ups, I didn't realize they were called stand-ups at that point in time, but that's what we had. We just continually had stand-ups because the office was laid out in such a way that we could just sort of like gather around a pod. We had a wall at one end of the room that was a whiteboard, 100% whiteboard, and at the other end of the office was a 100% blackboard. So depending on whether you wanted chalk dust over your suit or whether you wanted marker pen on the edge, of it, determine which of these boards. But we're constantly writing and capturing ideas and thoughts and observations. And you'd sleep on it and you'd go in the next day and you'd write something else up. And then when people came in and said, what do you think about that? And people would pick a marker up. And, yeah, I like that. Or, what if we did this? Or what if the process, and so on and so on and so on. Things that are really, really difficult to do in large organizations. So there's pros and cons of each. I think the secret in a large organization to synthesizing all of that is, okay, cater for the lowest common denominator for 80% of your stuff. But if you've got something that's really entrepreneurial that you need to sort out, you kind of need a different process flow that you can follow.
Yeah, that makes great sense. And I think there's also a lot that can be said for organizations that have an arm or a team within the wider pool that is just given complete autonomy and permission to be entrepreneurial and to be creative and to almost remove some of the red tape to prove that it can be done, and then to use that as an opportunity to then enable the wider organization or wider teams to learn from that and filter some of that through as well. So another area I think is one of your strengths, and that's stakeholder engagement and the influencing side of things. So what do you think is important? 2 questions. What do you think is important in that space? And where have you potentially not succeeded?
Just speak from personal experience there.
Yeah, and you know what? I am going to give you a chance to put me on the spot later on. So feel free to ask me.
Yeah, but you can play back your examples and we'll see what's what. Stakeholder management. My approach, my style, such that it is, was based on Franklin Covey, the 7 habits of highly effective people. A bit of a war story here. When I was at HSBC, we had a salesperson who wanted to sell us a load of training courses. And I was quite into that sort of stuff at that time. I think I bought some airport reading before going on holiday, and people had seen the books on my desk. So they said, "Oh, you can go to the meeting." And I found it really interesting to the point where if they'd offered me a job, I would have actually left and gone, because this is really, really powerful stuff. So one of the 7 habits is seek first to understand and then be understood. So it's kind of like, before you go in and tell people what they've got to do and what they should be doing, just walk a mile in their shoes and that kind of thing. So I love site visits. I love being embedded in a business. I'm not an advocate of having a separate, independent change management function, because I think what you get then is ivory tower thinking. Most of the powerful thinking I've seen and I've experienced in change management has been when I've been in the line, when I've actually been working with the operations teams themselves. So I try to recreate that. And go and see people and talk to them, say, well, what are your pressures? What are you under? Well, I've got to get 10% off the bottom line over the next 18 months, and I've got to do this, and I've got to introduce this, and this legislation's coming in. Right, okay. So where does my project fit in those? Right? Well, frankly, Ian, down here. Oh, okay. But it gives me context then. I'm not going to start making unrealistic demands of people that are busy on other stuff for all the right reasons. So I think building rapport, trying to understand the pressures that not just your sponsor, but everybody in their team, everybody in the delivery team is under, helps. And just being a contractor, that was one of the things that I learned. Was the first thing you did when you went into a new role was to say to people, how would you do it? What are the problems here? How would you do it? What do you think should happen? And invariably, a question like that would elicit response. Well, I'll tell you. They'll pull themselves up in the chair and say, start wagging the finger, but you make loads of notes. You think, well, that's interesting. And then when you've had 4 or 5 of those interviews, you get some consensus about where the blockages are. So understanding, first of all. So I think a bit of humility. Look, you guys run this business. You're the operational managers. In many, many instances in my career, it wasn't false humility. It was, I have no idea what you do and how you do it. So teach me. Yeah, well, why are these things important? Why does that person need to do this thing in this way? Help me to understand. And then you could take those arguments back and act. So I found bringing IT and the business, particularly as 2 stakeholders together, has probably been one of the things I'm most proud of when I look back on my career, is being able to talk enough IT language with IT people to bring them to the party, and then bringing, almost like I say, hosting a dinner party, and you're bringing 2 people together and you're introducing them and explaining why they might find each other interesting company. If you can do that, then you've got some rapport. If you've got some rapport, you've got some empathy, you've got some understanding. That's half the battle.
No, that's brilliant. I've not looked at it in that direction before about hosting a dinner party. I'll get one away. Now, sometimes though, in a dinner party, the meal might get burned. There's bad news to be given, and you've got to be prepared to give that bad news. So you have got to have some equity with those stakeholders or dinner party guests, so to speak. How would you do that?
I think being as open and as honest as you can, as early as you possibly can. So say, if you've got an eye, well, first of all, the stakeholders deserve to know what's gone wrong. Very quickly, they will want to know why, but you might not be able to give that answer. You might have to buy some time. So say, this has gone wrong, not quite sure how yet, investigating that. If you know what the alternatives are in terms of remedy, you give those straight away. Not really sure how we're going to fix this either. I'll come back to you in an hour, a day, or whatever it might be, whatever's appropriate. But I think don't ever cover stuff up. No, I don't think any stakeholder will thank you for. Here's a funny story. 2 weeks ago, we had a problem. And you know what? The problem's got much, much bigger now. Anyhow, I'd like your help resolving it. Is not going to win friends and influence people. Again, I found that sort of saying, whether it's walking past someone's desk, how's things going here? Well, could be better, but I need to find out something and I'll come back and tell you. Or could be better, this has just happened. Why? Well, this has happened and that caused that. Yeah, I know. It shouldn't. It has. Leave it with me for the minute. I'll come back, and so on and so on. So it's about updating and reporting when you say you are going to. I think that's absolutely crucial. So that builds credibility again. I'll come back to you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I'll give you an update at midday, however important the situation is. And then if you've galvanized your team and you've got some creative solutions, so saying, well, there's 3 options here. One is quick and very expensive, one is slow, very cheap, and there's a mid-range option. I've talked to your guys and they're recommending the mid-range option. It looks and feels like this. It will have these impacts and implications. Do you want to go through all 3? Or let's and so on and so on and so on, and try and work to that collective solution. So that's how I've usually done it. There are some people who I think were much more progressive in their thinking and their approach and the style. I think it's very much in modern days is give me the chance to help you to solve the problem. And I responded and reacted far more to those kinds of folks. So I do find it difficult, or I did. I didn't latterly because I basically just sort of told it as I saw it. But in my early days, when you're worried about the grade that you're going to get, your performance review, and what impact that might have on your bonus and promotion opportunities, and you don't want to give bad news up the way because that. And now, looking back on it now, if I could get some 30-year-olds in a room, I'd sort of say, ignore all of that. That's really, really awful. Here's what you should do. Mark yourself out as being somebody who's sufficiently knowledgeable and confident about what you're doing and how you're doing it to be able to have those difficult conversations, because that will give you credibility. It will give you a chance to put right what has gone wrong.
Brilliant. So I was going to lead on to a question around what would you say to somebody starting out in their career in change, in delivering really meaningful products. What would you say to them in terms of how to succeed at winning over people and getting them to actually deliver as a team? What's something you'd say to them that you wish you knew yourself?
A good starting point would be the 7 habits of highly effective people. I think that was a tome that resonated with me because it gave me a different way of thinking. I mean, it's a bit old hat now because what is it, 40 or maybe even 50 years it's been in print, but like so many good ideas, they stand the test of time. I used to have a little desk calendar that was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the idea was there were a certain number of index cards and you brought one to the front every morning. And it just reminded you. But that was in the days when you had your own desk and you had some drawers, you see, and you could put things in the drawers. But when you're a hot desk, you're not going to carry stuff like that around with you. But I'm sure there are electronic ways of getting those prompts every day. So like, some people learn a new word every day or do Duolingo streaks and things like that. And I found I kept reading these and some of them would be, oh, crikey, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I need to do that more. And just acted as nice refreshers. People buy from people. So customers, you as a consumer, you're far more likely to buy from someone in a shop who's helpful, knowledgeable, flexible, and all the rest of it than you are someone who goes, yeah, what can I do for you? The same holds internally. So if you need to build a supply chain, a service chain to deliver something, they're far more likely to do it if you get on with them. You don't necessarily have to like them, but just get a solid professional relationship, understand each other, empathize with each other, try and bring the commonalities together. Well, if you do that for me, that helps me do this for you. Try and look for those win-win situations. So I think building rapport with people outside of the project team is absolutely crucial. Be true to yourself, be authentic, deliver what you promise to deliver, and that will build credibility. In terms of galvanizing the team, well, that's not just a change dynamic thing. It's any team, really. It's about getting to know your team. Try to understand what makes them tick. Why do they come to work? What do they want out of this? What would a good day at work be for you? Because for that person, it might be, well, I'm here 9 to 5. I'm not interested in any extra responsibility. I'll do a good job while I'm here, but don't give me any of these development opportunities. I'm not interested. You might have a bright young thing that's rabidly ambitious and wants to get on, and you can really test them and give them extra stuff to do. But you've got to have those conversations. You really do. I think when I first became a line manager, I didn't really appreciate it. Well, I know I didn't appreciate that. I once went on a course, which part of it was getting some 360-degree feedback. And this was one of my key milestones in my career was my line manager sort of said, safe pair of hands, unspectacular, will never do anything radical. My peers, great bloke to be around, love him, fantastic. My team, he's a tyrant. And this was like, oh, right. And the way that the feedback was collected was, of course, give specific examples. Oh, I do that. Oh, I did that. Oh, I said that. Oh, crikey. And I realised that I wasn't impressing people above me. The people that worked with me thought I was a great guy to go out for a pint with, but would never think of bringing me into something interesting. And my team hated me. So I got a lot of things to work on. And that was really, really helpful in terms of changing it. So when I came back from that course and I got the feel, I was like, okay, we need to do things differently. And by we, I mean I. Right, here's what I'm going to do, da-da-da-da-da. And from then on, I enjoyed my work so much more because my team responded and reacted and I could give them stuff and they knew they had my confidence. My peers thought, oh, Ian suddenly put his head above the parapet. What's going on here then? And my boss would go, oh, yeah, you did that thing. Oh, I didn't know that was you. Yeah, that's me. Oh, wow, that's really good. Do more of that and stuff like that. So I would say to any young person, or any person, age doesn't necessarily need to come into it. You've got to be authentic. You've got to bring your whole self to work is the cliche, isn't it? But yeah, that's the package, good and bad. But be open with people, give people a chance to help you, and then you help others, and it will galvanize a very, very powerful dynamic very quickly, in my experience.
Excellent, and I like the bit about feedback as well. That's a whole topic on its own, really, about listening to feedback, taking feedback, and taking action, which is clearly what you did. And look where you are now.
Unemployed. I mean, retired. Yeah.
Semi-retired and living the dream with your favourite football club.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm going to wrap up soon, but I'm very keen to ask you about startups and startup culture, because I've always thought, I have for many years, that a project or a program or a continuous initiative that's delivering something really, really game changing. What do you think? And if you sort of agree, what are the tips that you would give, or maybe the one big thing that you'd say that we could incorporate in our initiatives that have an element of startup culture?
Well, the key thing about a startup is, of course, you've got a finite amount of money usually from your investors, and they expect a return. So you've got to be, the financial dynamic has got to be front and center. So whilst you can have all these wonderful cultural initiatives, there's still a hard-nosed economic reality that you've got to make some money quickly. Otherwise, the startup won't subsist. So I think the thing about a startup culture is it is entrepreneurial, and everything is fair game if it moves you towards that goal and gets you to your next funding milestone or whatever. So we made some very pragmatic decisions when we started Salt that weren't going to be enduring business lines, but it brought us some revenue and some income, which helped to cover the costs of the startup. So therefore, you've almost like given yourself another 6 months or another 12 months or whatever. So keep that front and center. But all the other good stuff that we've talked about earlier in the conversation, still in terms of interpersonal relationships, still I think holds good. We touched on it earlier in the conversation about in large organizations strangling entrepreneurship. And I think that's the biggest challenge that they've got, because there's a lot of banks with legacy infrastructure that simply cannot move at the pace that's needed. So they need to think outside the box. And if you're working in an organization like that and you've got a really, really entrepreneurial activity, you need tremendous resilience to keep going at it, because it will not be easy. It will not be easy at all to get through those administrative and bureaucratic and procedural hurdles that you've got to get through. So I think developing in a large organization, developing that resilience, winning over some key influences quickly to your argument, and trying to build up almost like an army of people that are prepared to fight for that, is the equivalent of the startup culture that sort of says, right, we've got to get to this revenue target, this income target by this date. Here's different ways we can do it. Let's evaluate those and move forward. But they are different. They are markedly different. In my experience now, looking back in hindsight, I really, 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 really enjoyed the startup challenges. I think more than any other job I've done in my career. It was a truly unique opportunity, and I'm so grateful that I took it, because it was a bit of a risk at the time, frankly. But looking back now, wow, that was so influential in how I think and how I act and what I do and how I do it. So if anybody listening to this has the opportunity, and financially it makes sense for you, I think it's a really good development opportunity.
Excellent. Now, you'll be pleased to know, Ian, thanks for that. You'll be pleased to know it's now your turn to ask me one very difficult question. Anything you've been burning to ask for a long, long time, now's the time.
So what would you do differently, let's say 10 years ago, based on the knowledge that you have today? What would you tell the Cliff of 10 years ago? Whoa, don't do that. Do more of this. What would it be?
Interesting. So probably more than one thing, but certainly one thing I would say to my younger self would be to spend more time building relationships. I spent a lot of time in my earlier career focusing on accreditations and obviously building knowledge, which was very valuable, but not enough time building relationships. And so I think I suffered in things like building a network, learning from other people's day-to-day activities, and not just what I thought was right because the lessons that I learned from a course told me so. And then, of course, building enough relationships so that if and when things go wrong, I'm able to have more meaningful, sensible conversations with people that I'm working with, and able to sleep at night a bit better. So that's definitely one thing that I would really say to my former self, my younger self, for sure. The other thing I would say is enjoy it. I don't think I enjoyed a few years earlier on in my career as much as I wanted to, because I worried too much unnecessarily. There are so many high stakes things that happens when you're working in change, when you're working in delivery, absolutely. But actually, if you've got the right mentality that you want to succeed, and you want the team around you and with you to succeed, then there's always a way around it. And it's definitely not worth losing sleep over. And I probably lost too much sleep over things I shouldn't have done. And now I'm realizing it wasn't worth it.
There are a few times in life where age is an advantage, but age brackets experience is definitely one of those, because when you're facing the same problem for the third or fourth time, you think, well, I've overcome this 3 or 4 times previously. This is just the fifth time. But the very first time you're facing it, it's, oh no, the sky's falling in. What am I going to do? But a bit of grey hair sometimes in a room can bring wisdom to bear. And there are projects that I worked on in my 30s and 40s where when you got somebody, a voice like that in the room, whatever role they are, so well, hang on a minute, it's not as bad as that, is it? Yeah, we can do this, we can do that. Oh, right. No, it isn't as bad as that, is it? Thank goodness for that. It's if you haven't got that voice in the room. So I think being that voice in the room and that soothing balm that you can sort of bring and smooth over the project team is incredibly helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks. Now, Ian, unfortunately, we're out of time. So maybe we can have you on another day. Who knows? We'll see.
Honor. Yes.
Absolutely. Great. Fantastic. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for tuning in. You can catch Ian. I'll give you all the details about how to catch Ian and his events later on. So you have all that at your disposal. You can contact me at any point on LinkedIn. You can also contact me via our newsletter. Just log into changeleadersplaybook.com and you'll get everything you need there. And other than that, stay tuned. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.